London, the grand jewel of the British Empire, the epicenter of culture, progress, and hold your nose, unimaginable filth. If you think rush hour traffic and overpriced coffee are bad, let's take a trip back to Victorian London, where the stench alone could make a strong man faint, and your chances of survival depended largely on whether you were born into silk sheets or a puddle of sewage. Yes, dear reader, today we journey into the slums of Victorian London, a world where inequality wasn't just a social issue, it was practically a sport. The rich lived in opulence, their biggest problem deciding between tea or sherry, while the poor lived in conditions that would make a rat pack its bags and leave. But don't worry, this isn't just a sob story. It's a wild, chaotic, and darkly humorous ride through history, featuring overcrowded tenements, smog so thick you could spread it on toast, and some of the worst jobs in human history. So grab your top hat, or your ragged coat, depending on your social status, and let's dive headfirst into the reality of Victorian urban poverty. Now, if you were a rich Victorian, life was chef's kiss delightful. You could stroll through Hyde Park, sip imported tea, and spend hours discussing extremely important matters like whether forks should have 3 or 4 tines. But if you were part of the other London, the one that smelled of despair and questionable hygiene, your daily schedule was slightly less glamorous. 1. Wake up to the soothing sounds of your neighbor coughing up what might be his last lung. 2. Step outside and immediately regret it because the streets are essentially a mix of mud, sewage, and discarded dreams. 3. Go to work if you're lucky. If not, try not to starve. 4. Dodge disease, avoid getting robbed, and maybe just maybe live to see tomorrow. Victorian London slums weren't just bad. They were a masterpiece of suffering. Overcrowded, disease-ridden, and teetering on the edge of total collapse, they were home to thousands who had the misfortune of being born on the wrong side of history. Entire families were crammed into single rooms with no plumbing, no fresh air, and no hope of ever affording a scented candle to cover up the stench. Speaking of smells, let's talk about the Great Stink of 1858. Imagine a summer so hot that the entire River Thames turned into a steaming pot of raw sewage, baking under the sun like a rotting meat pie. The smell was so bad that it shut down Parliament. That's right, the lawmakers, who usually ignored the cries of the poor, suddenly decided that something needed to be done, but only because the scent of human misery had wafted into their high-class noses. Of course, poverty wasn't just a matter of bad smells and cramped housing. It was a full-time nightmare. Disease was rampant. And not the cute kind of illness where you take a day off and watch Netflix. We're talking cholera, tuberculosis, and typhus diseases so efficient they could wipe out entire neighborhoods faster than you can say Industrial Revolution. And jobs? Oh, you thought your boss was terrible? Try being a mudlarker child who dug through the muck of the Thames looking for anything of value. Or a tosher, someone who voluntarily, I repeat, voluntarily, waded through sewers in search of dropped coins and lost trinkets. If that doesn't make you appreciate your desk job, I don't know what will. But wait, you might be wondering, surely someone did something about all this suffering? Well, sort of. Charles Dickens made a career out of roasting Victorian society, writing books like Oliver Twist that basically screamed, hey, maybe child labor and starvation aren't great. Meanwhile, reformers fought for better housing, public sanitation, and education, which shockingly helped. Yet, despite all the efforts, inequality remained a defining feature of Victorian London. The rich continued their lavish lifestyles, while the poor clung to survival, proving that capitalism has been playing the same game for centuries. So, what can we learn from all of this? First, be grateful for plumbing. Second, appreciate the fact that you don't have to walk through raw sewage on your morning commute. And third, remember that inequality is a persistent beastone that needs constant fighting, lest we find ourselves in yet another great stink of our own making. Now tell me, are you ready to take action, or are you just here for the history lesson? The slums of the past may be gone, but the struggle, that's still very much alive.